Hello and welcome to Lesson 3, Biopsychology, the endocrine system. So today we're going to look at what the endocrine system is, the main hormones that are involved. We're going to look at how hormones affect behavior and what homeostasis is. We're then finally going to look at what the effect of prolonged or chronic stress is on the body as a whole. Let's get stuck straight in then. The endocrine system. Hormones are chemical messengers, and these are released by glands. The endocrine system is made up of glands. These hormones control and regulate activity of target cells. The glands that make up the endocrine system and secrete hormones directly into the blood stream, where they go everywhere. They go everywhere the blood goes. Now here they travel around the body. When they find their target cell, they can then bind to that cell and have some effect on that cell's activity. The endocrine system has an important role in internal regulation of our physiological system, and it works closely with the autonomic system. So, endocrine hormones. We have a series of glands that make up the endocrine system, such as the thyroid and the testes, and we have different hormones characteristically associated with each of these glands. So let's look at a few that you may have heard of before. The testes produce testosterone. Testosterone is responsible for regulating sperm production and the emergence of secondary sex characteristics. Take something like estrogen, the female hormone. This stimulates egg maturation, controls secondary sex characteristics in females during puberty. The adrenal medulla has adrenaline, and this stimulates the fight or flight response, as well as other hormones such as glycogen, which has a really important function actually in that increases blood sugar by breaking down or encouraging the breakdown of glycogen, which is the main form that glucose is actually stored within the body. And glucose, as you know, is important for aerobic respiration. So, let's have a look at some of these glands in a bit more detail. Let's start with the king, the master gland, the pituitary gland. This is called the master gland as it produces many hormones that control many of the other glands in the body. So, the pituitary gland is comprised of two parts. We have the anterior and we have the posterior. Now, you may have heard the word posterior refer to your backside. Try and remember that. So your bottom is called your posterior. So posterior is back part, anterior is front. Ants have antennae that go forward, and posterior is your bum. So the posterior pituitary releases oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin has a really important role. We'll see what that is in a minute. And the anterior, the front one, releases adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is really important. We're going to look at that in a minute, and follicle stimulating hormone as well. Release of these hormones is controlled by the hypothalamus, so we could say that the hypothalamus is the guy in charge, the lady in charge of the entire endocrine system. But the pituitary gland is the one that does all the work. Right, pituitary hormones then. As we said, the anterior releases ACTH. Now this is usually in response to stress. It produces follicle stimulating hormone as well as luteinizing hormone. The posterior releases oxytocin. Now what's really interesting about all these hormones is that they can have a different function in the female body as they do in the males. So let's take LH and FSH. These act by stimulating the ovaries to produce progesterone and estrogen, but in males they stimulate the production of sperm. Oxytocin stimulates the contraction of the uterus. Obviously, males, we don't have uteri, we don't have a uterus, therefore oxytocin isn't going to stimulate it. But in males, it has an important role for brain development. Oxytocin in females and males is important for bonding. And there's been numerous studies to show that by increasing people's oxytocin levels, they actually increase how generous they are to in-groups, how much they like someone and stuff like that. They usually administer it via a nasal spray. And one really interesting possibility in the future is using oxytocin to deal and treat autism, which is amazing. If we can encourage that bonding, that social bonding, that sometimes people with autism struggle to achieve. So, hormones and functions. The hypothalamus releases corticotrophic releasing hormone, or CRH. This then, in turn, triggers the pituitary to release ACTH, which then, in turn, causes the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. So, we've got this cascade of events. We've got CRH causes the release of ACTH, which causes the release of cortisol. Now, how do we slow it down, stop it? Well, the brain is capable of detecting high levels of cortisol, and as the cortisol levels rise, the hypothalamus reduces the amount of CRH it's releasing, which has a knock-on effect of reducing the amount of ACTH being released, which then has a knock-on effect of, you guessed it, reducing the amount of cortisol being produced and released. This is important because this limits cortisol levels and prevents them from getting too high. This also ensures stability. As the hormones rise, we turn off the tap and they start to decrease. Imagine like a bathtub with the plug out. You turn on the tap, the level's still rising. If you turn off the tap, it will start to sink. You need to turn on the tap to maintain sort of equilibrium, homeostasis. The adrenal glands then. The adrenal glands, they sit on top of the, on top of the kidneys, just here. And they have two parts. They have the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. The cortex is the outer part and the medulla is an inside region. Hormones released by the cortex are vital for life, and the adrenal cortex produces cortisol. Cortisol is a really important hormone. This supports important bodily functions such as anti-inflammatory effects and cardiovascular functioning. Cortisol production is increased due to the presence of a stressor, so levels go up. Low levels of cortisol are associated with poor immune system functioning, inability to deal with stress. So this is going to be one we come back to in a moment. Adrenaline. Adrenaline is one you're very familiar with. It's a rush you get when you've perhaps experienced a fright or you are on a roller coaster or something. It's thrilling. Helps the body respond to an acute stressor by increasing heart rate and, as a result, blood flow to the muscles and brain, and encouraging breakdown of glycogen into glucose, which is needed for muscles in providing energy to muscles. Noradrenaline constricts blood vessels, which has the effect of increasing blood pressure. So you see this threat, you have this increased level of cortisol, your adrenaline is pumping and your heart rate is going faster and faster, and the blood flow is increasing because the noradrenaline is constricting the veins, and it's basically pumping huge amounts of blood saturated with oxygen and glucose needed for muscle activity, so that you can run or fight or do whatever you plan on doing. So hormones have a really important role. That is the endocrine system in a nutshell. Let's have a look at a brief evaluation or application. It's more AO2 than AO3 of how the endocrine system can explain certain behaviors. So one of the limitations of the endocrine system is that whilst homeostasis tends to regulate levels of different hormones, certain activities can actually increase or decrease hormones long term. So for example, the presence of a chronic stressor can affect how much cortisol we are producing and releasing, and this can have negative effects on our immune system. A classic study by Keekholt-Glaser actually found that stress levels in 75 first-year students were higher during a period of exams, as you'd expect, than they were before. However, that this had the knock-on effect of reducing their immune system functioning. So during the exam periods, they were more vulnerable to infection. That's interesting, because that suggests that prolonged chronic stresses, those associated with doing a difficult job or being in an oppressive relationship or a depressive situation, this can lead to physical health problems. Do some research. I love research. You must be interested in this. What is the most stressful job in the world? And do people who engage in that stress have high levels of sickness? Teachers, for example, not to play my own violin here, but teachers have quite high levels of long-term sickness. So many teachers have nervous breakdowns, they have psychological and physical disorders, depression, you name it. And one of the reasons is not so much because the physical challenge of the job. I mean, you could effectively do it sitting down, but the emotional elements, the fact that you have a group of individuals who you hopefully care about, who you want to do really well, who you give up your free time to assist and achieve, but what's more is you have no direct control over it. So if they choose to take your advice and do what you've asked them to do, they'll go and do it and they'll be fine. But that lack of control causes a great deal of stress. It's worse in other jobs. There's a great film called Pushing Tin, which talks about air traffic controllers. They have one of the most stressful jobs. I'm not sure if it is the most stressful compared to soldiers on the ground, but do some research and let me know what you found. Practical applications, more AO3, AO2 from this could be, well, find out what the maximum number of hours you're legally allowed to work in the UK is. And might this not be related to the research like Keycolt Glazer's study? If you had an unlimited number of hours you could work in the week, or there was no legal limit, I should say, would that not have a negative impact on the population's health? Which countries work the fewest hours? Which countries work the most? What are the health relationships there? All interesting stuff. You must be interested. Right, some exam questions then. Nice easy one you could get as a warm-up. Give 2 examples of the effects of hormones released by glands in the endocrine system. You could go anywhere with this. I would say perhaps talk about the stress response, release of ACTH, cortisol and so forth. You have 2 examples of the effects, so you have to explain 2. Laura has just been diagnosed with Cushing's disease, poor Laura, and this has caused dysfunction of the pituitary gland. As a result, she suffers from high blood pressure, anxiety and fatigue. She's also finding that when she cuts herself, it takes a long time to heal. Using your knowledge of the endocrine system, explain Laura's symptoms. So this is an AO2 question. You've got to take facts like anxiety, fatigue, high blood pressure, and inability to heal, and apply what you know about the endocrine system to them. Outline the function of the endocrine system and discuss its effect on behavior. So just like before we talked about the nervous system, you're going to need more than you've got here. So you're going to need to apply this to some other area of psychology. You could, in this case, I would suggest apply it to the fight or flight response, or you may be able to do it, apply it to sleep or some other topic. Interestingly, it's worth noting that you get a lot of your evaluation from general evaluations such as IDAs, biological determinism, bioreductionism, applications, research and so forth. You can do quite well in a question like this without providing too much research. As always, thank you very much for your time. We have looked at the endocrine system, glands, hormones, and how they affect the system. If you have any questions, by all means, please ask. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and I will see you around. Bye-bye.